This eminent domain here was not for a bridge or a road or a school. This was simply somebody else wanted to live here. This is so private people could make money off where I lived and my neighbors lived.
Give us a chance to compete for the big economic engines, the office parks, the industrial parks, and the retail shopping centers. They need large parcels of land. The only way you do it is through the use of eminent domain.
New London, Connecticut is one of America's oldest cities.
Oh, it's a great city. It is halfway between New York and Boston on the water. It's simply ideally located.
Recently, however, New London has had its share of problems, as explained by City Attorney Tom Londrigan and local developer Michael Joplin.
We are, according to state statute guidelines, a distressed municipality. First of all, we've suffered a declining population since about the 1980s. We have doubled the unemployment rate than the state of Connecticut. And on top of all of that, approximately 56% of the land base of New London is non-taxable.
What we've been doing here in New London is either treading water in terms of the condition of the city, or we've been managing decline.
Local attorney Edward O'Connell explains why a small tax base was a problem for New London.
In Connecticut, the property tax is the prime method that municipalities use to raise their revenues to pay their teachers, their firemen, their policemen, pave their streets, run their schools. We have the Coast Guard Academy, Connecticut College, various churches. So we have all the various tax-exempt institutions and very little taxable land left.
We are 1 mile wide, 6 miles long. That's it.
New London has nowhere to expand to increase its tax base. Since it's an old community, it is fully developed. The other towns around here have enormous areas to expand in. If you wanted to build an industrial park in Norwich, well, you'd have your choice of 10 different places to build it.
New London took a hard economic hit in the 1990s.
New London got some bad news. The Navy Underwater Sound Lab was consolidated with a facility up in Newport, Rhode Island.
They were engineers and very sophisticated engineers. They were the people who developed a lot of the underwater sonar equipment and the communications equipment.
We lost 1,800 jobs and the base closed.
But in 1998, while the city was still reeling from the loss of its Navy base, New London got some good news. Pfizer, a large pharmaceutical company that already had a major operation across the river in Groton, Connecticut, announced that it would build its global research facility in New London.
This was a global research facility that every economic development coordinator in every country, state, and county in the world would have wanted in their location.
The site for the Pfizer complex was on the Thames River, adjacent to the Fort Trumbull area of New London.
Now, they did have some demands on the state of Connecticut. There was a Calamary's junkyard north of their site, and they wanted that remediated. Immediately to the north was the regional sewer plant, and it smelled. Pfizer said, we would like that facility to be the state of the art.
And the third thing they wanted to do was see if we could do something about the Fort Trumbull neighborhood, but not anything in particular.
The Pfizer facility would inevitably affect those like Suzette Kelo, who lived in Fort Trumbull. Kelo had grown up near the fort and had recently moved back there. She liked the neighborhood, and it was affordable.
It's a nice neighborhood, working class people. I mean, sure, I would have loved to have bought a house on the Point for $400 million, but, you know, obviously I couldn't afford that. It was a safe neighborhood, and there certainly wasn't anything wrong with the neighborhood. There were houses, there were probably 75 to 80 homes here, some of them single family, some of them two family. Some of them were a little run down, but most of them were nice Victorian houses.
Kelo began fixing up her house, including a new paint job.
By the water, salmon pink, you know, just sort of liked it. When I went to the close, and the lady that I bought the house for, she was kind of old, crotchety, old thing, and I had already painted the house by the time we had the closing, and she goes, well, that's an interesting color. I said, I wanted to brighten up the neighborhood. She goes, looks like you did. Something like that.
Kelo first read about Pfizer's plans in the local newspaper.
And they said that Pfizer's was coming to town and they were going to have a development which included the Fort Trumbull neighborhood. The residents were going to be asked to sell their homes, and if they didn't sell their homes, they were going to be taken by eminent domain. First you read it and you're like, oh yeah, right, New London. It's sort of like New London's always trying to do something, and everything it does fails.
But there was substance to the story. The state of Connecticut was planning to give New London a major grant to redevelop Fort Trumbull.
State of Connecticut came to the city of New London and said, in effect, how would you like $70 million for a development plan to connect what Pfizer is building with your downtown to the north? It's a tough question. Do we want it or do we not want $70 million? For years, New London has seen state monies go to Bridgeport, go to New Haven, go to Hartford. London never got anything. And so we said yes, we would. We need it.
The City Council authorized the New London Development Corporation, a local nonprofit agency, to develop a comprehensive plan for Fort Trumbull.
NLDC is an agent for the city. We are funded by the state. Our mission is to basically change the economic status of the city. It's about tax revenue, and it's about creation of jobs. It's about changing the image of the city.
Almost immediately, the NLDC began to acquire properties in the fort. Some of the owners were willing to sell.
All the absentee people, the people that didn't live here, sold. No sooner did they buy them, they would apply for a demolition permit and take them down. And their theory behind tearing down all the houses was that we wouldn't have anything to fight for if we ever got around to fighting, because everything would be gone.
As more information became public, Kelo grew more concerned. She spoke with a local politician who advised her to contact Kathleen Mitchell, a community activist.
I got a call from Suzette, and I had never met her before, and she's yelling and carrying on. They're going to take my house. They're going to take all of the houses. They're going to take every house here. They're going to demolish them. And I said, oh my God, this woman's nuts. But I thought, well, at the very least, they're probably going to try to take her house. So I agreed to help her. I began to think of the usual things, you know, publicity, walks, letters to the editor.
She says, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to put in a press release and you got to have meetings. So I said, okay, Kathleen. We handed out flyers and we had petitions. And then, you know, that's when the newspaper reporters came. What are you going to do? Well, I'm not going to sell. You know, what are you going to do? I'm going to fight it.
Mitchell also suggested a neighborhood meeting.
We talked about what we were going to do to try to stop them. They wanted to know what I was going to do to help them.
She would call me every day early in the morning, and we would talk all day long, what can we do next?
Kelo became an advocate to save the neighborhood.
I went to a city council meeting. This was Kathleen's idea, because all of them were so old that, you know, they couldn't go to these meetings. You know, I asked them to each write something so I could bring it to the city council meeting and read them. Mrs. Pasqualini wrote, I married my husband, you know, 60 years ago. I've never lived anywhere else. I raised my children here. Please don't make us move.
Others soon became concerned with the plight of the Fort Trumbull residents. One of them was Sally Ryan, head of New London Landmarks, a group dedicated to preserving New London's historical buildings and neighborhoods.
Our aim has always been to work for the preservation of the historic New London. And we should try and help these people to preserve their homes.
Ryan helped found a grassroots organization known as the Coalition to Save the Fort Trumbull Neighborhood. As an initial step, Ryan investigated whether Fort Trumbull could be designated as a historic landmark area.
Landmarks had paid for a study of that neighborhood. We had a lot of documentation on all the houses. It didn't have the hook to get it on the National Register.
But even without formal designation, coalition members thought Fort Trumbull was worth saving.
This was a really special neighborhood. It was built by first Irish immigrants and then Italian immigrants. You could look at different buildings and see the masonry, the brickwork that was used. There were little Italian gardens in these various houses.
The rumors that reached us were that Pfizer didn't want this little, slightly shabby neighborhood right next door. And what we have heard is that there was a closed-door deal between Governor Rowland at the time and Pfizer that they would move to New London and the neighborhood would go.
Coalition members were also united in their distrust of the NLDC's development plans, given New London's history of so-called urban renewal.
I've seen redevelopment, I've seen eminent domain, I've seen them clear property, and it doesn't work.
They destroyed some beautiful homes and neighborhoods all around downtown New London. Thought after that record that we had learned our lesson. We didn't. But, the definition of madness is to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results.
We were astonished that people in New London would say, fine, let's do it again. But they were told that it's different. This is a unique combination of academic brains and corporate money and private-public partnerships, and it would be different this time.
From the city's perspective, while Fort Trumbull had great potential, it had many problems.
It had a junkyard. It had an abandoned Amtrak railroad yard. It had an oil tank field. A rough, tough area. And I think the majority of the people felt that finally somebody was going to do something to help this area of town.
New London faced an initial choice. It could proceed to acquire the property under a Connecticut statute to promote economic development, or under a statute to revitalize areas that were run down or blighted.
This area certainly qualified for the blight statute, had an 80% commercial vacancy rate. 80% in a commercial zone. The housing stock, 88% of the stock were deemed poor to fair.
There were some homeowners that had properties that were well maintained, but blight doesn't necessarily mean that there is no good property there. It just means it's a characteristic of the area, and this met those characteristics.
The state of Connecticut decided not to give the money to the local redevelopment agency to proceed under the blight statute. Instead, they gave the money to NLDC to go under Chapter 132, Economic Development.
The NLDC retained engineers, architects, and environmental experts to study Fort Trumbull and develop a comprehensive plan.
We collected the right consultants to answer the question, what is the highest and best use of this land? The answer to that question is in the context of the community at large.
It's been zoned industrial and commercial since 1929. A plan of development has never changed in close to 80 years. Industrial and commercial is the future for this.
Work began immediately to improve the former Navy base, which included restoring Fort Trumbull itself, a fort built in the 19th century as part of America's coastal defense system.
Now, I was born and raised in New London. I had never seen that fort from the water or from the land, because the military built buildings that surrounded it. And Pfizer knew of the plans for the state of Connecticut to renovate that. And when asked when it was going to be done, well, we're going to have about a 10-year plan to renovate it. Pfizer said, how about doing it in 2 years? The governor used to love telling the story about how people said, when did you build that fort?
Many of the industrial sites in the fort had been designated brownfields because of contamination.
Virtually all the site was polluted and needed environmental remediation. A former Amtrak Maintenance Away rail yard was a environmental nightmare. We've found that every single parcel we've touched, including all the residential parcels, has exceeded the state's criteria for residential direct exposure of contaminants, primarily arsenic and lead.
The plan also called for a complete overhaul of the area's infrastructure.
We then worked with design engineers that were primarily civil engineers in terms of improving the streets and the rights-of-way and the infrastructure and getting that put in. So it really was a case where all new infrastructure was required.
The culmination of the NLDC's work was a comprehensive plan known as a Municipal Development Plan.
It's really for a plan for 90 acres. They divide it into various parcels for ease of administration, but it's not 6 or 7 different plans. It's one plan for the entire area. Contemplates a museum, shops, taking advantage of the waterfront, office. Those are the type of uses that would attract people to New London and get New London hopefully back on its feet.
We can create parcels, we can redraw the lot lines, We can offer to a developer a 3-acre parcel, a 4-acre parcel on which they can build 100,000 square feet of office space, or they could build 80 units of housing and basically reinvent the area.
In August 1999, the NLDC formally presented its draft plan that called for the removal of all the homes to prepare the site for an extensive mixed-use development. Coalition members met with the NLDC to voice their concerns.
And I said, well, as I understand it, this is a draft, and that there are public hearings, mandatory public hearings before this thing goes through, before it's actually voted on. And I'm a professor. A draft means you can change it. And all we were saying, amend the plan, do everything you plan to do, but amend it to incorporate the existing homes and businesses into this splendid development.
They got like 50 acres of prime waterfront property. Myself and my neighbor's home, we take up a little over 1.25 acres. And certainly we've never been against the development. We welcome the development. Build whatever you want to build. Just let us stay. If I can't live here, no one's going to live here.
It just seemed senseless, and they never gave a reason. They never said, this is why they have to go. And once I went to a city councilor at the time and said, why are you going to do this? And he said, because we wanna. Just like that, because we wanna.
Public review of the plan culminated in a hearing where the NLDC presented the municipal development plan and its reasons for removing the homes.
It is not good planning to put single-family detached homes with the backyard, the front porch, the picket fence across the street from a regional sewer facility.
You know, I moved here with the sewage treatment plant here, with the scrap metal yard here, with the marina here. I didn't move here to complain and change the neighborhood.
In January 2000, the NLDC presented the plan to the City Council for approval.
The meeting lasted for about 4 or 5 hours. Everybody got up and spoke. We begged and pleaded for them not to do this. And then it came time for them to vote. It took about 2 minutes, and they voted to remove us all by eminent domain.
There has to be somebody who makes the tough decision. In this case, it was the elected officials for the City of New London. The fact that somebody loses does not mean that the majority didn't listen to them.
They had their marching orders from the state. If we don't take all the homes by eminent domain and do this plan, the state isn't going to give us $78 million.
The City Council also formally authorized the NLDC to implement the plan and to use eminent domain if necessary to acquire all remaining properties.
The City Council decided to adopt this development plan, seize this once in a lifetime, once in the history of the city of London opportunity, and go forward.
Coalition members were demoralized.
There were fights, there were tears, there was a lot of struggle over what do we do, and we decided, well, let's just keep trying.
The coalition had previously considered hiring a lawyer, but it would have been too expensive. At that point, coalition member Peter Krekovic came up with an idea.
I really felt we needed some outside help before these houses were leveled. And at that point, I heard of the Institute for Justice. So I told the coalition that I would follow up on this. So I wrote the Institute for Justice a letter.
I read that letter, said, you know, this looks like the type of case that we are looking for.
Scott Bullock was an attorney with the Institute for Justice, a public interest law firm dedicated to protecting individual liberty. One of the Institute's major initiatives was to stop eminent domain abuse.
We're talking about one of the most awesome powers a government has at its disposal, eminent domain. The ability to remove you from your home, from your small business, from your land, apart from putting you in jail. That's about the most serious thing a government can do to you.
While most property owners had sold their homes, a few continued to fight. In November 2000, the NLDC instituted eminent domain proceedings to take the remaining homes. The Institute for Justice filed suit on behalf of Kelo and 6 other landowners who owned a total of 15 properties. Bullock's argument was simple. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution requires that there be a public use to justify taking private property.
We challenged it on the grounds that taking land from A to B, simply in the name of private economic development, commercial development, was not a public use.
So what is a public use? You know, does it have to be a school, a post office, a fire department, or is developing an economy which will sustain jobs and produce tax revenue so that a city can meet its primary obligations of public education? Is that a public use? I would argue it is.
New London's lawyers prepared to defend the plan in court.
The Institute for Justice said, you know, we really don't need a trial. There are no facts in dispute. Why don't we just stipulate to the facts and argue the case? We said no, we want a trial. We wanted the judge to hear our experts.
During the 7-day trial, New London offered the testimony of several experts, including an urban planner who testified that it would be a mistake to permit a few homes to remain.
He said, I don't recommend leaving these 7 plaintiffs where they are. It's like the spotted leopard. The judge said, well, what do you mean by that? He says, it's like spots on a leopard. You have to find a developer and tell him, come to this parcel of land, but, by the way, you see that single-family house over there? You're going to design your complex around them. Oh, and by the way, there's another spot over here. And he said, Your Honor, you're not going to find a developer to come in and handle those type of challenges.
Bullock countered by suggesting that the plan was not driven by any sense of public benefit, but rather by what Pfizer, a private company, wanted.
They played a very key role in putting together the municipal development plan. One of even the city's experts did describe them as the 10,000-pound gorilla. Pfizer wanted a 5-star luxury hotel for their guests and people that were coming to visit them. They wanted upscale condominiums for scientists that were working there on short-term stays and so forth. And they wanted office space for people that do business with Pfizer. And at the end of the day, guess what was put in the municipal development plan? A 5-star luxury hotel, upscale condominiums, and private office space.
Bullock was critical of the NLDC's planning efforts, citing as an example one particular decision.
But they managed to salvage one building, the Italian Dramatic Club, which is a private, men's-only social club, very popular, and lo and behold, the NLDC and its planning process found a way to save the Italian Dramatic Club. Somebody put it one time, is that the Italian Dramatic Club can stay, just all the Italians have to go.
Bullock argued to the court that the proposed development in the areas where the plaintiffs lived was highly speculative.
The evidence that we produced in the trial demonstrated that the office building was not going to be built any time in the foreseeable future because there was no market for it. In parcel 4A, they could not even say what the property was going to be used for. It could be parking, could be retail, could be a museum.
This is how the argument was presented to us. Do you have a developer? You answer that question, no, I don't have a developer. You're plain speculative. It's vague. You're taking somebody's property and you don't even know what you're going to do with it. It's unconstitutional. Okay. I have a developer. You have a developer? Yes. Oh, you're taking property from A and giving it to B.
You should at the very least have to name the use, and there has to be at least a reasonable certainty that the property is going to be used in the way they say it is going to be used for.
The key to the case was whether taking the plaintiff's properties for future development constituted a public use.
New London was justifying its condemnations simply upon its ability to raise more tax revenue and create more jobs. They were simply relying on the fact that they think that the new owners of the property would be able to put the property to more productive use. If that was not stopped, then there really are no limits on eminent domain authority. Every home would produce more tax revenue if it were a business. In America, should the government be able to take your home to give to Walmart? People would say, of course not.
I hear cases of Walmart coming to town and saying, I want that block. The municipality takes the property, does nothing with it, and gives it to Walmart. That's wrong. That's terrible. That's not what we did in New London. We took 90 acres of land. We put basically $70 million into the ground. We remediated a brownfield site. We reshaped it. We reformed it. We put in new roads, sewer, public walkways, access to the water. That's what we did with the land. Those are significant public uses and public benefits.
The trial judge held that the NLDC was justified in taking some of the properties, but not others.
So how did he split the baby? He said economic development is a public use. That's fine. You can go forward with your plan on all the parcels except 4. You have to make your proposed use there more specific.
Both sides appealed. In a divided decision, the Connecticut Supreme Court ruled in favor of New London, holding that economic development was a public use that justified taking all the properties. The Institute for Justice filed a petition for certiorari with the United States Supreme Court. The court accepted the case, setting the stage for the most important property dispute in decades.
If I'm going to be thrown out of my house, the whole world's going to know about it.